Não, vou embora. Eu vou treinar lá em casa. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to our Mondays, second Monday of the month. We have our English studies here at Cantina de Luz. As usual, before we start, we like to say a prayer and evoke our Father, God, and Creator, and Jesus, our Master. Thank them for the opportunity for being here and joined under their love, their peace, their harmony. We ask them to protect this evening, to protect us, to inspire us to have fruitful conversations about the teachings of the gospel and the teachings of the good spirits that give us messages of hope, messages of charity, and all-fulfilling love. May this evening fill our hearts and our minds with good thoughts and ideas that help us grow as people, grow as spirits, and hopefully with these messages we can turn them into actions in our day-to-day lives and improve ourselves today and always. So be it. So this evening we would like to invite our friend Nancy to talk to us about the sacred rite from Our Daily Bread. Please come in.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight the message is from the book Our Daily Bread from Francisco Cândido Xavier by the Spirit of Emmanuel, and the number is 104. The title is A Sacred Rite. For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ not only to believe on him, but also to suffer for him. It is on Paul, Philippians chapter 1, verse 29. To cooperate personally with the human administrators in a direct sense has always been the object of ambition of the workers of this or that terrestrial organization. Is it an act of true confidence to be able to share the responsibilities between the superior who knows how to be just, with the subordinate who knows how to serve? It establishes the basis for harmony in the daily activities, a realization that all institutions seek to attain. Many of the students of Christianity appear to ignore that with regards to Jesus, the reciprocity in the name elevated to the maximum degree in the area of fidelity and comprehension. A greater understanding of the divine program signifies a greater expression of individual testimony in the services of the Master. Expanded competence, greater accumulation of duties. The more light, the more vision. Many individuals who have naturally achieved certain intellectual characteristics but is still considered mentally sick would like to accept the Savior and believe in Him, but they cannot instantly achieve such an inner personal involvement. In lieu of the ignorance they fail to eliminate and the capriciousness they possess, they fail to integrate in the right to perceive the truths of Jesus. This will only be achieved when they readjust, which is indispensable. However, the discipline who has achieved the benefits of the faith was considered worthy of residing spiritually with the Master. Between he and the Lord, an exchange of confidence and of responsibility does already exist. Nevertheless, while persevering in the joys of Bethlehem and the glories of Capernaum, the labor of faith unfolds marvelously, but in perpetuating the division of the anguish of the cross, many students flee fearing the suffering, revealing themselves unworthy of being selected. Those who behave like this are categorized as crazy, as to withdraw from collaborating with the Master is to scorn a sacred rite. All right, this message I think is talking to us who comes to the Spirit Center or go to the church. It doesn't talking to the beginners or to the people who didn't embrace a religion already. And this paragraph, when it says a greater understanding of the divine program, means there is a divine program for every single of us. Nobody come here and say, well, I will do whatever I want. You know, of course we have our free will, but when we born on this planet, we have something to do. The people will be with us, the kind of job we will have, the family, our kids, our parents, our children, and family in general, and friends. So we have a program to follow. Then that's why he said a greater understanding of the divine program signifies a greater expression of individual testimony in the services of the Master. And then he says here, expanded competence, greater accumulation of duties. So God will never give you more than you can handle. If you ask to yourself, am I supposed to handle this? Yes, you are. So he will never give to us more. I know there is some moments in our life that we just look and say, hey God, I think you gave to me a lot of problems. It's too much to me. I cannot handle. Yes, you can. And we cannot forget that we always can send God a prayer and ask to Him send us encouragement and understanding of the situation we are having in that moment. And also don't forget that sometimes we are in the middle of a trial, and we always learn in this situation. And then he says on the next there is a next sentence saying, the more light, the more vision. So I think this is an invite to us to try to know us better as much as we can, and also know the universe laws, try to know better the people who lives with us, our husband, our wife, our children, and the people is with us, try to understand them better and know them better. And the first thing is to know ourselves as the first thing. As you know you better, you get more light. This light is inside us. And you have more vision. Our vision gets wider. And the life gets easier when we do this. And what else? And I took a verse from the Bible. It is on Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, because I think it's related to this message. And it says, no temptation has seized you except what is common to mankind. Like we said before, nothing is extremely hard. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. So never it is beyond your forces. Never is too much, right? And the other verse says, but when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. So that's what I understood, and is invitation to us to try to know us better, understand our lives better, and like it says on the first verse here, for it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ not only to believe on him, but also to suffer for him. Not just believe on him, but also to be open to suffer from him is part of the life. So thank you very much, and I would like to invite Hendrick for tonight's lecture. Thank you.
Good evening again, everyone. So thank you, Nancy. Very kind, wise words by Emmanuel. It's interesting how there's always some connection between one message and the next, right? So tonight, we're continuing the study of chapter 5 of the Gospel According to Spiritism, where we're talking about the afflicted, those, as Jesus says in his Beatitudes, in the sermon, where he's listing the different blessings or the different beatitudes. He says, "Blessed are those who are afflicted," and so Nancy talking about how we deal with pain, how we deal with our suffering. There is a whole chapter on just that in the Gospel According to Spiritism, how to deal with suffering. And tonight, we are looking at the section number 21 out of this chapter. As you can see, it's 21. There will be still a few more. There's a lot to be said about suffering in general. And we are in this in the section where there are specific messages from spirits. And this one is about losing loved ones. It's about premature deaths. And it's a message that was given by Samson, who was a member of the Spiritist Society of Paris after the foundation of Spiritism had been started in 1857 with the Spirits book. He obviously passed after that, and in 1863, as Kardec and the mediums working with him are getting messages and getting prepared to release the Gospel according to Spiritism, they get this message from this friend of theirs who had been a part of the group of the initial Spiritist Society of Paris. And this one is on premature deaths. And as usual with these messages, it's quite nice to read them afterwards. It's hard to convey in a talk the emotions that the spirits give us, and in these messages. It's quite beautiful. But I'm not just going to read it, because we should, just talk about a little bit about this topic. That's quite, I wouldn't say controversial, but a lot of people think that that question God, that question God's justice, use this general topic as a sort of, not sure if a proof, but a questioning of, if God is really just, if God does what. Sorry about that. If God is so just, and then how can God take away children? Who are the hope of the world. And they have come to bring such joy to the families, and to bring hope to the future of the world. Today I was listening to the radio, and I heard that as somebody mentioning, somebody asking somebody else, well, what kind of message would you give us, about getting engaged in political life, or in life in general, and trying to make make a better world. And the message was just that. It's you're young, and the world this world right now is being built for you, the young, and it's time that you start taking care of it. And this was a teenager, or a sort of a high schooler asking those questions. But what happens when people who are so young end up passing away, at such a tender age, whether it's a baby, whether it's somebody who had, as we like to say, had their whole lives ahead of them. I'm gonna have to go fix that. One second. All right, hopefully that doesn't happen again. So, we look around, and the message starts with this questioning. When death cuts your family down, do you think it's right to question God's justice at that time? You're so accustomed to saying, well, God cannot be just if he's sacrificing those who are strong, and letting older people around live and suffer, while God's taking away a 17-year-old or a 20-year-old so young. That youth is necessary. That person is much more useful. Some people think that way, and so how is it that that God can break the hearts of the mothers and the families of those of these people, or these children that get taken. And it's quite natural for us to think that way, because we're used to thinking of ourselves or thinking of life. I don't think that's going to stop happening. Sorry. It's we think of we think of our lives as something that we live for right now. We're always looking for a more comfortable life, or I'm working to help my children have a better life than I did, right? Or and we're always thinking of things about this life. We're always looking for the next phone that's going to come out next year, right? It's Christmas time is coming, and we're all rejoicing that it's the birth of Jesus, and we're all happy. We're going to be giving thanks in a couple of weeks for Thanksgiving, and Christmas is coming, and yet so much about that is about what it is that we're going to be cooking for Thanksgiving, or what are we going to be giving as gifts or getting as gifts to each other on Christmas. And all signs that even when we are when we are religious and connected with spiritual ideas, we are still very connected to our material lives, and human beings in general have grown to think of life as this this thing that begins at birth or conception, in this event, and that it's over when it's done. And so when we see somebody who could have had a wonderful life dies at 5 or dies at 15, we think, wow, that was cut so short, and where's the justice of God in that? And and really, when we try to understand God's justice, and based on all of the basic tenets of Spiritism and the Spiritist doctrine or philosophy, we really start to understand that life goes on, life continues. In fact, this life that we're living in currently is not really the main life, right? And so the spirits, both in Samson here, but also in the Spirits book, there's a couple of sections and a series of questions about the death of young children and so on, and the answers and the general logical answers that tie in with the understanding of reincarnation, the understanding of spiritual life before and after this material life, is that those children came here to be just children often for just that amount of time. And often, we tend to think of life not being just for them, but really, often it's often the case that their lives, they often will come to to become examples to their own families, and to become part of the atonement of their own families. As Nancy was saying about suffering, we are not given any more suffering than we can handle, but sometimes there's a need for the spirit of that child or that young person to have come here and have not stayed very long. And also sometimes there's the need for that parent that family or everyone around that person to go through that loss and live through the consequence and learn with the consequence through that loss. And so, when we understand God, we understand that everything that happens for a reason. In the youth group, one thing that we've talked a lot about on Saturdays here with the the teenagers and the preteens in our group has been, about how is it that God works, right? There used to be this. I heard this story when I was a kid, of someone who really thought he believed in God, and he thought so hard that he believed in God that he said, God will save me from everything and anything. And so this person goes out on a small boat in the middle of the sea, and a storm starts, and the boat capsizes, and that person is just out on the water, and starts praying, and he or she is very faithful, and says their prayer with such fervor, feeling I am absolutely sure that God's going to come and save me. And at some point, a fisherman, sees that person floating, comes around and says, "Oh, here, come with me. What are you doing out there?" I said, don't worry. God's going to send me some help. No, but you can come with me. I can take you with me. No, don't worry. I know that God will come and save me, and makes that person go away. And that guy says, "Oh, this friendly person out in the middle of the sea," and says that to somebody else, and he's like, "No, let's go get him. Let's not let him say anything." And the guy's still there. It's like, "No, go away." And they tried to pull him, and he's still in the water and doesn't want to come. And essentially, and it's getting weak, and eventually they decide, okay, all right, you want to be there, fine, we'll leave you there. And so, but they say, we got to tell the authorities, because otherwise, we're going to feel like we didn't offer the help, and that will be trouble for us. So the authorities come, and Coast Guard or whatever comes in, and and wants to find the guy. They get there, the guy is passed away, and then the guy, and then the story goes to the other side, and he goes, face to face with a sort of God figure on the other end, and says, "What happened? What do you think? How did you die?" And it's like, "Well, I died praying, waiting for God, and God never came." It's like, we sent two boats for it, that third boat after you, and you still didn't want it, right? So, God doesn't have to work in miracle, in absurd ways, right? We are the vessels by which God does God's work, right? So, as we say in our group, we've been talking a lot about doing a lot of work around charity and helping the Fraternity Without Borders group. And but one thing that we've discussed a few times is, if I want to see the change that God makes, or that God can make, I need to be part of that change. That change has to come from me. And so nothing really happens without a reason. With God, everything has a reason, and everything finds a way. And so there's got to be a reason for these spirits who have come, and come for such a short period of time. And we can speculate and talk about different possibilities, different reasons. There, you read books from André Luiz or other authors. They talk about how sometimes a spirit has cut their life short, and now has to come back for a little while to sort of finish what they had to complete in their previous lives after having gone through a lot of suffering in the other realm, in the spiritual realms, and and when they're ready, coming in and completing their what they needed to do. But and that's just one example. But I'm sure there are obviously many reasons, or many ways that us as spirits will go through our atonements, go through our trials in this planet that is, as it's said in the Spirit's book, it's a planet of trials and atonements. We're not here to just have nothing to do. We're here because we have to be here. There will be some suffering, there will be some pain, and we have to do the work that shows that we are morally progressing as well as intellectually progressing as human beings, as spirits. So he says here, believe me. Let me see here. Yeah, nothing happens that has not an intelligent meaning, and no matter what happens, there's always a reason for it. If you scrutinize better all the pain that redounds you, then you would surely find divine reason, regenerating reason, wherein you would see worthlessness of your interests, which as a consequence would become so secondary as to be cast into last place. So this is the Samson is inviting us to say, if this is what you are thinking of, if you're thinking of these commonplace ideas that are very materialistic in nature, very immediate, very very much not consumerism, very much what you want right now and what you expect, then he's inviting us to move past those ideas, to remember what we've already talked about in the previous chapters, how life continues, how life goes on, how the justice of God takes form in many different ways, and suffering. Suffering is a part of our existence and our general. Oh, I wonder if this is it here. I think that was it. My cell phone. I'm sorry. He says, believe me, in the case of an incarnation of 20 years, for example, death is preferable to any of the shameful dissipations which bring untold distress to respectable families. So, I actually heard this, again, I think on NPR, not too long ago. They were talking about drugs and young people, and the opioid crisis and so on, and talking about how a lot of young people are dying of overdoses because of opioids, fentanyl, other drugs that are really widely available right now, and there's a lot of public health concerns with that, and somebody had said, and maybe it was on TV, I don't remember, but it really touched me in a way. They said where sometimes the death of somebody who dies of overdose is a lot, while painful to the family, who really sees that life wasted, if you will, that sometimes that person just finished dying to their family, right? And what they meant by that was that when someone is that deep in drugs, that deep into in their addiction and their vice, they they are no longer that same person. They're no longer that kid that we remember as 5-year-old or 10-year-old. And but the death of that kid in the eyes of the mother and the eyes of the family is a lot more painful than when the that person eventually passes away. And I thought that was a really strong way of looking at this problem, right? So, there's a lot of suffering in life, and sometimes going through life as an adolescent or as a young adult can be very painful, and that ends up being how a lot of people get involved in drugs and so on. And so one of the things that Samson comes to remind us is, it can be painful that same way. And so you're saying, well, that God allowed that kid or that a young person to die, and therefore he's not just. But think of the possibilities of that person just suffering alongside you for the rest of their lives too, right? Or for much longer times. So he invites us to think of death, of death as also as just this transition into the spiritual realm, right? So, and a child that die, while it's a tragedy, because their lives was full of hope and so on. What hope are we talking about, right? So, premature, he says here, premature death is frequently a great blessing which God concedes to those who depart, so preserving them from the miseries of life or the seductions which possibly occasioned the loss of life. We, as we said in the beginning, often the reason why that spirit came to earth and to live around us for such a short period of time was actually more to those who stay, more of a lesson to those who stayed than to that spirit that went back, right? So he says the person who dies in the flower of youth is not a victim of fate. God judges that it is not suitable for that person to remain any longer on earth. And if we don't understand the spiritual side of life or the spiritual nature of our lives, it's very hard to accept death as a blessing, as it says here, a great blessing, right? It's hard for us to accept these tragedies. But when he says here, you see that person so full of hope, you see that life cut, right? To what hope are you referring? He says that of the earth, where he who had gone could have perhaps shown or made his way to become rich or famous. I mean, is that the hope that we're talking about? Or is it hope of a better spiritual life? And if that's the case, if that's our aim, to continue our progress, to continue to be better beings, better spirits, then why is it more hopeful for them to continue to grow in a world that is so full of suffering, so full of ways for them to fall under tragedies of life, like depression or drugs, right? So he invites us to open our minds and our hearts to think about this a little differently. So he says, instead of complaining, rejoice when it pleases God to withdraw one of your children from this veil of miseries. That's his view of earth. And he passed away not too long before he sent this message, right? So he's like looking it up there and saying, wow, I was just there. This was not fun. This was very painful. And this whole pursuit of being rich or whatever, it's more painful than spiritual life. And so God, we can look at the lives of those who pass away earlier, and we can say, they were spared a lot of the problems that and sufferings that they would face. Excuse me, later in life. So he says, and when you know this, and since you know this, isn't it then selfish to think that they should be here with you? As someone who lost that family member, um, would you want them to be here more for you, or really for them? Is it really for them? Sometimes it's really not quite for them, right? It's sometimes we are holding on to the pain of having lost them ourselves, and it's our and it is our pain. It is our pain to bear. As Nancy said, we are not given any more pain that we can handle. So is it better for us to wish that they were still by our sides, or that they are freed and that they will be there waiting for us once we come back, right? So our view, the spiritist view of life, continuing past this one material life that we find ourselves in, is very important in understanding this justice, this idea of how God can be just and still allow this to happen. And then as I was reading other references, listening to some other speakers talk about this, a few other topics came about. What about when they go naturally versus when they go because they're murdered? How about crimes of passion, for example, when somebody who's young and think their life is over because that other person is no longer wants to be with them, and through a crime of passion, they commit murder, and take that young person away from that family. How do we deal with that? Is that different? Divaldo, I was listening to some of the things that he had to say about that, and some of the problems that we get into as the receivers of that sort of pain, and he says it's not to judge anyone, but these are the if we understand and accept life as a continuous progression, from this world to the next, it becomes easier for us to not be accepting that a murderer should be allowed to murder, right? But Jesus, in Matthew 18:7 says, "Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs that offenses comes, but woe to that by whom the offense came." So this is a world of trials and atonements, and there will be suffering, and again, God's justice being very clear, and God being just, He allowed that say a girl or in a case like that, um, that the life may be taken away because that might be part of what that spirit had to go through. But more importantly, what the family had to go through, right? And we see sometimes messages of hope out of these people, right? I was, in the example that he was talking about, some high-profile murder that had happened in Brazil, where the mother, she was obviously extremely sad about what had happened. And he said, but you look at the life that this girl lived, and and she, um, uh, she brought joy to her family as while she was around, and her mother recognized that that she lived through the pain, and she said, the pain will probably not go away. The pain of the loss will probably not go away, but I don't need to hold on with feelings of revenge or injustice by God, or injustice towards the perpetrator, because if I and she said something like, if I don't pardon him for what he did, that's going to continue to eat me away. And instead, not only she said, I really, justice must be served, the normal expected justice shall continue, steps of justice shall continue, but I can't, and I can't not forgive him, because otherwise that will continue to take away from my joy in, remembering her for who she was. And not only that, she also, because she was so young, all of her organs were in perfect condition. And she said, my daughter, while she's not with me anymore, the lives of 7 people have been saved or touched by her organs. So, her memory lives on through those people. And and one of the things that Divaldo says, sort of as a conclusion of this is that once something like this so tragic happens, we hold on to. It's too easy to hold on to what is negative, to hold on to what is sad, and the spirit who has passed away. The worst thing that we can do to that spirit is to hang on to all the bad memories, because they will always be attracted to our thinking, our thoughts of them, our thinking of what happened. And the more we continue to remember them by their deaths and not by their lives, the more they relive that, the more they are attached to what happened to them, in that event. And so, even in that loss, as the tragedy, the news of the tragedy, subside, and the feelings, the immediate memories, start to fade. The memories that should fade completely are the ones of the negative event, and not, and we should and we ought to remember those spirits as, for all the joy that they brought, for everything that was good about their lives, and so on. And if we can't, and he was asked, what would we say? what would you say to those who are who can't accept, you know, who can't accept death very easily? And he said, you know, and I think that this is kind of true, right? The topic of the message tonight is about premature deaths. But, you know, how premature can a death be, right? I mean, is 5-year-olds is premature, 15 years old is premature, right? How about 40? Is that premature? It is. I mean, Jesus was at 33 when he died, and he was talking about eternal life, you know, and he was leaving us with the grace of his message and the message of the love of God at 33, right? And, you know, who has lived more years than Jesus and has done half of what he did, you know? And he only lived to 33. So premature is really on the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, I'm in the 40s, and I don't want to be gone anytime soon. So, you know, I'm trying to take care of my body as much as I can, you know, and my mind, which again, not sure, but we keep working at it. But, you know, you could think that it's premature, right? And so he says, you know, we're always thinking of death and preparing for death as if, you know, there really is just, you know, only one life. But, you know, whenever we think of death, we're always thinking about our neighbor is going to die. You know, it's like everybody else is going to die first, right? You know, as much as you know, we grow old and, you know, more people that we've known, of course, obviously more people that we've known will be dying because time goes by. And, you know, and people get to that age where, oh, you know, yet another person I knew has passed away and so on. And so, but we're always thinking that it's our neighbor who's going to die tomorrow or you know, soon. We're going to continue living forever. But, you know, the trick is that neighbor is also thinking of their neighbors and we are their neighbor, right? So, so, you know, so our day will come no matter what, right? That is the one truth once you're born, is that you will eventually, you know, return to the spiritual life. And so it's really, you know, up to us to change our attitude towards death and towards spiritual life, really. You know, so you know, he ends with this. So Samson ends, and I'm going to read the last paragraph here because I thought it was pretty interesting. Oh, so before that, he says, you know, when he's talking about selfishness is, you know, wanting to have that kid or that young person next to you to continue their suffering. You know, is that really what you want? He says, you know, just rejoice in the fact that, and he says, mothers, know that your beloved children are near you, very near. And, you know, every time we are thinking of them, every time we are praying for them, or, you know, or thinking of all of the happy events from their lives, or all the happiness that they brought to us or to those around them, you know, they will be there. They will be. They are there. They are near us. You know, and conversely, you know, thinking of their pain will probably just make them. Will most likely just make them suffer also. So, anyways, he finishes the message saying, "Those of you who understand the meaning of spiritual life, listen to the beatings of your own heart when calling to those loved ones. If you ask God to bless them, you will feel great consolation, the kind which will dry your tears. You will feel magnificent aspirations, which will show you the future which our Supreme Lord has promised." So it's, you know, so the spiritist message, the message of God is a message of hope, but not hope only in this life. It is hope of, of a fully spiritual life, of which we are here just, with one, almost like just one pit stop to do a little work, and then go back and come back and do a little more work, right? And so I wanted to finish. He mentions this story of Saint Francis. It says so. It's being, the fact is we're all going to die. There's, our neighbor is going to think that we're going to die first, or somebody's going to win that, right? But but being ready to die takes some understanding of spiritual life, but also takes action. It takes attitude, and so he talks about Saint Francis, and somebody says his son. I couldn't find the story, but either way, the idea being, if you are living the correct life, or if you're living a good life, if you're living towards the spiritual life in a way that you understand what your place here is, what work you need to do, how you're helping others, and how you're doing what God is asking of you, and how are we being vessels of God's work. Is to be like when Saint Francis was asked. He was asked, what if you learned today if that you will absolutely die? He was tending to his garden. He was just doing his work in his garden in the morning, and somebody asked him, what would you do if you learned today that tomorrow is your last day of life? What would you do tomorrow? And he said, I would be tending to my garden the same way I'm tending to my garden today. And so, having that sense of I am doing the best I can. I am living, a God. I'm leading the life that God is asking of me. Will lead to us understanding that death will be just that transition, and really that is a good thing to aim for. If you can imagine that if I died tomorrow, I would still like to be doing exactly what I'm doing today, then just keep doing what you're doing today. But if I'm going to die tomorrow prematurely, whether I'm 15, 45, or whatever, am I ready for that transition? And am I ready for the transitions of those around us? And so that rounds the circle back really to, what are we doing? What am I doing to make myself better? What am I doing to make those around me better? And when that is understood, and when we bring that into our lives, and we turn our lives into the vessels of God as He would like us to be, then there's really nothing to fear. We will just continue tending to the garden if that's the ideal thing to do. So, anyways, I hope you guys got something out of this. It's a tough topic sometimes. It's strange, especially to those of us who have children. It's hard to think about it, but it's the hope of eternal life that Spiritism helps us understand, and the justice and love of God that is eternal. So, thank you. All right. So we're going to go to passes, and I think we'll finish the transmission there. Thank you. God bless us all.